Hey guys, Kevin from Evolution Images here, and in this video, I'm going to talk about what I think is one of the most underrated lenses in the Sony lineup. What I'm talking about is the 100mm STF GM OSS 2.8 with a t-stop of 5.6. So let's talk about this lens. First, let's tackle the name. STF stands for Smooth Transition Focus and is a lens that contains an apodization filter, otherwise known as an APO filter, that creates exceptionally smooth bokeh. Now, Sony released this lens about 6 years ago, so 2017 at the time of filming this video, and is really not a new lens to the market, right? It's been around for 6 years, and I have had it for probably about 2. Now, in those 2 years, I haven't really used it that much, but I'm starting to use it now, and I'm going to tell you why and show you some examples of the differences between other types of lenses and this one. One of the major differences between this lens and other 100mm primes or other lenses that may be in your arsenal is that it has a macro ring. So the macro ring allows it to focus a little bit closer than a standard lens. So you can adjust it from 0.57 to about 1 meter, and then you can set it to 0.85 meters to infinity for when you're taking portrait shots. What I use the closer setting for is for something like flowers. If I want to get in real close to the center of the flower, I might set this to the closer focus setting and move in a little bit closer, and then using my A7 R5, I can just crop in, and it's almost like a macro. The second item that's different in this lens over other types of lenses is that apodization filter. If you're not familiar with an APO filter, what it is basically an interior neutral density filter that's clear in the center and it slowly graduates to darker on the outside. So what that does is allows this lens to give you just ridiculously awesome bokeh. And we're going to take a look at some of the images that I shot yesterday with my daughter Caitlin right here at this very spot. So in some of the shots that you're going to see, I did compare this to my Sony 70-200 G Master lens. Now, that's a 2.8, it's a zoom lens, so it is quite different than this. But shooting that at 100mm, also set at an f-stop of 5.6, you can clearly see the difference. And here's a couple examples of those.
All right, here we are in Photoshop, and before I get started, I want to say a special thank you to my daughter Caitlin, who graciously posed for these images and allowed me to use them in this video. So on the left, we have the 100mm lens. On the right, we have a 70-200 G Master 2.8. The main difference between these two shots is that the 70-200 had to be stopped down to 5.6 to get the same exposure. I kept the shutter speed, the ISO, the focal length, and my distance from the subject exactly the same for these shots. So with the 100mm lens, you get the creamy bokeh in the background, and with the 70-200 at 5.6, you can clearly see that the bokeh is a little bit more jittery and not nearly as blended. So in these images, you can see the difference in the background bokeh, but again, remember that this side, the 100mm side, is shot at an actual aperture of 2.8, whereas the 70-200 is shot at an aperture of 5.6. Now I've adjusted those, keeping everything the same to keep that exposure the same, and that is the difference in the lenses. In this image, I have adjusted the macro ring to 0.57 to 1 meter, which then allows me to get a little bit closer to the subject. In this case, it's this flower, and then then you can see what happens with the bokeh in the background when you do that. So your depth of field gets a little bit more narrow, but really here's where your pseudo macro capabilities come in. You can see that you can get really close, you can achieve a nice focus, it's very sharp, but that bokeh in the background is really awesome. And in this final image of my daughter's dog Rex, you can see that the background bokeh is really nice and it blends in very nicely even on this left hand side but yet you don't lose sharpness. So this one was taken with the macro ring set at 0.85 meters to infinity. I had to get a little bit further away because he wouldn't sit still, but you still have an incredibly sharp image. Focus was nailed right there on his eye, and you can see how far you can zoom in before it starts to get pixelated. But it's a very sharp lens, and it generates very nice bokeh.
Okay, so one of the problems with this lens is this is not a low light lens. You really need to have a lot of light available to you to use this. Because of that apodization filter, this is going to function a lot like a minimum aperture of 5.6, or I should say maximum aperture of 5.6. So it's going to need a lot of light to get the exposure that you want. If you want to keep that shutter speed up and you want to keep your ISO down, use a lot of light for this. So that's going to turn a lot of people off, especially wedding photographers, because obviously in a wedding venue, you really don't have that much light to work with. A lot of times it's dimly lit. This is not the lens you're going to want to take with you. If you're shooting the bride and groom outdoors in the middle of the day, then shoot this. This would be a great choice.
All right, so if you're interested in picking up this lens, you can pick up a brand new copy at the Sony website for just $1,500, or you can check for the used sites. Adorama has it right now for $936. There's another used one at Precision Camera and Video for $1125, or you could use the trusted Amazon for $14.98. I'm sure there's probably a bunch of versions available at other reputable dealers, so look around if you're interested in purchasing it.
Hey guys, thanks for watching this video. If you like what you see, please hit that subscribe button and give us a thumbs up.